and welcome to the Makers Movement podcast, where we spend time with designers, collectors, curators, and of course, makers. If you're new here, this isn't just a podcast, it's a movement. Every month, we challenge ourselves to choose one handmade item that brings more intention, story, and fun into our lives. This month's theme is something that reminds you of a favorite place, whether it's a handmade mug that reminds you of your childhood kitchen, or even a sketch of just your happy place. We're exploring how objects can hold memory. Today's guest is someone whose entire body of work is rooted in time, place, and memory. Aidan Higginbotham, a Nashville-based film and tintype photographer, and just the coolest person ever. Aidan's artistic journey started with capturing moments among friends, but soon evolved into a deep dive into analog photography, historical processes, and even the resurrection of vintage large format cameras. We'll talk about slowing down with film in a digital era, how place and emotion have fed Aidan's visual storytelling, and why making things with your hands is just the best. I hope you enjoy our conversation as much as I did. To kick us off, I would love to hear a little bit more about what initially drew you to tintype photography, specifically rather than other kind of photography methods.
I didn't always know that I wanted to make tintypes necessarily. I think when I was younger, probably my later teenage years, I had a friend named Eric Doty. He's a native Nashvilleian. He no longer lives here, but he's a couple years older than me. His dad is actually the one that owns Cumberland Transit, or used to. But they're just like very outdoorsy people, and Eric has a brother, but they're just like always doing cool stuff. And so Eric was always, documenting them going snowboarding, or he did a lot of BMX. So he was always documenting all of this stuff. I think it started out, he was doing like video stuff, but then he found his way into film. And he was just a friend of mine that I kind of looked up to. And I was like, wow, like all of Eric's pictures are so cool. And I think seeing the kind of photographs that Eric could take made me think like, oh, I want to do that. I have friends that do cool stuff that I could document. So I didn't necessarily like think about approaching photography from, I guess, like a art standpoint. Like it wasn't like I want to make conceptual based art, as it was more like, ooh, I just want to document this cool moment, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, Eric kind of like, I really do think, I don't even know if I've told him this, but I totally would. I still see him every now and then. He lives in Utah now, but yeah, I think he really pushed me, or just him doing that really made me think to myself, ooh, I want to like start messing around with a film camera. And so I think that was my first, time that I was like, I'm going to pick up this film camera and just kind of shoot some pictures and see what happens. And when I was younger, I used to travel a lot, and I still do, but I was just traveling and taking photos of friends. And a lot of my friends growing up did graffiti and, taking photos of them out at the train yard, painting graffiti at night. Specifically, I wanted to play with like making long exposures.
Nice.
I'm going to give you a very long-winded answer, just so you know.
No, this is the point.
Be prepared. All right, cool.
It.
I just didn't know. I mean, I know you're probably going to come in here later and like take in like the little points that you want and stuff, but I was just taking bad pictures. I think that was the fun part about it too, because I didn't really know what I was going to get. And sometimes like Bob Ross would say like happy accidents or whatever. Yep. Is that a Bob Ross quote? Yeah.
It was, yeah.
So just to go along with that, like I think in film, yeah, sometimes you have user errors, and so you get light leaks, or maybe you have these like double frame images where the photos overlap, and these kinds of things happen to anyone that shoots film, and it kind of makes it fun. And then once you kind of realize how those mistakes are happening, you can kind of like control those mistakes, and you can start playing around with doing that. But then I went to college a few years later, and I gained 24/7 access to a darkroom.
Nice.
And so that was a big moment for me in just kind of growing my passion for photography. And what I think I learned was that it was less about creating, like, I don't know if I ever had an idea ahead of time, like for what I wanted a photo to look like. But I think that I would just go do fun things with friends, take pictures, and then I would be like, oh, I have this dark room, and I would go in there. And I really fell in love with the process, and spending time in the dark room, getting lost in the dark room. And when I say getting lost, I mean like kind of getting lost in time and spending hours in there and not realizing that 5 hours had passed by.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like being in a cave.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was really fun. And just, I think, like growing up in school, I always had a really hard time learning. I very much have ADD. And I remember growing up, my mom always talking about different learning styles that people have. And I think that when I got into the darkroom, it was the first time that I was like, okay, hands on learning is the best way for me to learn, you know? And other people have learning styles that work best for them, but mine was hands on, or at least it was the one that I appreciated the most and I felt like passionate about. And then it wasn't until, like I said, like 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, when we first met, is when I first was doing tintypes. I mean, I want to say that when I took your picture, it was probably my second pop up that I ever did.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. Before doing that one, I did one other on 12 South in front of 12 South Tap Room because I used to work there. And I was like, hey, I'm doing this photo thing now and I want to open it up to the public and see how it goes. And so I did it there. And then Gorilla Biscuits was doing that little market. And I'm pretty sure that was my second one.
See, that's that was such a like serendipitous moment because my partner and I, probably a couple months before that, we were so like burnt out and sad from COVID
Uh
that
huh.
we decided to sit and have coffee and make bucket lists. Just trying to get like pumped up of like, okay, there's stuff we want to do. There's more to focus on.
Yeah.
And at the top of my list was have a tintype portrait made. And it seemed like such a far-fetched out there bucket list thing that I was convinced. I was like, "Oh, this'll never happen." So, when we saw you set up, it was like, "Oh my gosh, we have to do it right now."
Yeah. And it was like a guy that really didn't know what he was doing at the time.
Great. It turned out great. I have it if I had camera on, I'd show you, but I have it right here. It's on my desk. I love it.
Nice.
So I guess, like, in that process of kind of discovering your joy for the dark room,
Mhm.
was tintype something you tried in the early days, or was it something that you kind of, like, gradually worked towards it?
Well, so after college, I dropped out of college because I kind of got to a point where I had a little bit of money set aside from my family in a college fund to go to school. And then I was at a school that was very much conceptual based art. Like I was in an art program and it was all conceptual based. And again, I have no problem with conceptual based art. I don't personally think that that is my jam. And so I left college because I'd run out of money and I didn't want to go into debt because I'd already kind of established. I was like, I don't know if this is for me. And so after that, I think that was 2018, 2017. I went to college late. But yeah, I think it was 2017, 2018 that I dropped out, moved back to Nashville. And then for like a few years, I kind of, put photography on the back burner a little bit. And I was still like shooting film every now and then. In that time, like from 2018 to now, I lived in Seattle. I lived in Florida for a little while. I lived in Portland, Maine, and I was still traveling around a lot. And so I was still shooting photos, but I kind of just didn't, I wasn't super adamant about doing it. And I just didn't have passion. I felt like the flame kind of died out and I was dating some people. And I think I was maybe just focusing more energy into like my relationships as opposed to you know, focusing on what excited me personally.
Classic 20s move there.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was like early mid 20s at the time. I'm 30 now for reference, but yeah, like I guess 3.5 years ago or so, a friend of mine. So I paint murals also on the side sometimes with a friend of mine that I grew up with, and he owns a mural company in Nashville. But we were painting a mural over in Wedgwood, Houston. This big project. It's the Big Tickets mural on Fourth Avenue. I don't know if you've
Yes.
seen it. The
Yes.
big collage.
Love that one.
So we were working on that, and that was something that was like a 3 month project. Took all summer. We were just I've known this guy for 15 years, but we were just kind of talking about everything because we were sitting next to each other all day, every day for 3 months. And I think at one point he asked me, why did you stop doing photography stuff? I lived with this guy in college. We would go out at night and do graffiti or street art kind of stuff. I would always be photographing it. And so he asked me why I stopped doing photography. And I said, hey, that's a good question. I'm not really sure. And I jokingly said that I should start getting into making tintypes, but I didn't really say that wholeheartedly. I kind of think I just said that like as in like, oh, that would be cool, but I didn't know how serious I was about it, you know? I had a camera that my dad had given me that was a large format camera. It's actually the one that I took your picture with.
Oh, sweet.
That I then got fixed. And around that time I got dumped. I was in a relationship and I knew that the end of that relationship was nearing. And I think when we broke up, it really just solidified that I was going to dive headfirst into this new process and like explore something that I wanted to do for myself. So yeah, I got everything that I needed and jumped into it. And I would say for probably 5 or 6 months before going out in the public, I was just photographing friends at my house and taking really bad pictures. I mean, I think the one I can't really remember what the one of you and your partner looks like, but I mean, I've come a long way, and I would say that my photos nowadays are actually kind of what I originally envisioned wanting them to look like, I guess. Like I just have a better control of lighting and posing people and all these things. But for 6 months I just took really bad pictures. People loved them in the first 6 months, but I just was like, I knew that I was working towards something that was going to be greater than the
Yeah.
images I was producing back then.
Oh yeah, I get that so much of like just wait. Like, I
Yeah,
promise,
yeah.
I know it.
Just give me a couple years.
Yep.
But yeah, I think I just was reintroduced to a new photographic process that is hands-on and that can be tweaked. And there's so many little variables within the process and things that you have to learn. And so I think it's just, I don't know, I kind of fell in love with it. And it's all like I'm always learning something about it. And it's so silly because it can be like the smallest thing, but it's like, oh, if I do this, then my photos will look like this. And it's like, oh, great. Wow, that's so silly. Like, I could have figured that out forever ago, But I don't know. Yeah, it's really great. It's just really fun to be back doing a hands on process. And especially not only the hands on process, but just a process where I'm constantly interacting with people and getting to meet new people. And I had mentioned that I worked in restaurants before. And so I think something that I appreciated about working in restaurants was that I got to socialize all the time and meet new people. And I definitely enjoy talking if you haven't noticed. And so I just think that the tintype or just, portrait photography, it doesn't even have to be tintype. I think portrait photography really suits me for that reason because I get to interact with people and then get to photograph them and provide them with this thing that is special to them.
That is, I think that's actually a really good segue into the next thing I want to talk about, which is the process itself. Because I had a little bit of a conundrum, when I was thinking about like who I wanted to talk to for handmade. And I was like, does this count? I was like, well, if any type of photography counts as handmade, it's going to be tintype
Yes.
photography because it's such an involved process. So just for anybody that's not like necessarily close to it or doesn't know what a tintype is, can you do like a really high level walkthrough of the process? Because I'm assuming it's a lot.
High level.
Yeah, so just like, I don't know, like
Details.
yeah, like what does the flow look like?
Yeah. I mean, so my flow, like, I mean, having people into my studio, like some days, if I'm at an event or maybe just at my studio and I'm photographing a lot of people, by the end of the day, I'm completely tongue tied because I have said the same thing over and over again, right? Because I have a whole spiel that I tell people. But I mean, so if you were to walk in, I'd hang out with you for a couple of minutes, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. It just depends. Some people come in and they don't want to talk as much, and that's totally fine. And we just jump right into the photo. But other people come in and they want to chat. And I find that chatting for a little bit ahead of time makes people more comfortable. And then we can kind of be loose and goofy. And, people can just really lean into the whole process and feel comfortable in front of the camera because it is a lot to ask, Like, even if people are signing up to get a photograph, they still might be a little nervous about sitting
Oh
in front
yeah.
of the camera. And I totally understand that. I hate being in front of the camera
I am
personally.
that person 100%. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And then I'll sit there and be like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. But I feel that like hanging out with people for a little bit and talking and showing them who I am and learning a little bit about them makes them trust me in the whole process, and I feel like they end up liking their photo a lot more. Typically, I'll, talk about posing with people and, just kind of what they envision it for their photo or kind of what they want to portray in their photo. Some people just want to come in and they just want like a very simple headshot, and that's great. And other people come in and they want to do something that's a little more, out there. And I love doing stuff like that too. I think that at events, it does tend to be very straightforward portraiture, whereas in the studio, it's like we can spend more time together and get wacky and create, a weird image, weird in the best of ways. But then after that, once we decide on kind of what we're doing, I will have my subjects relax for a few minutes while I go into the darkroom, and I will pour a chemical called collodion onto the surface of a piece of metal, which acts almost like an adhesive to the next chemical that is applied to the metal, which is silver nitrate. So first we put collodion on the surface, and then it goes into a tank or a bath of silver nitrate. And silver nitrate latches on to the collodion, and it sits in there for a few minutes while it sensitizes. And it's basically creating an emulsion like film that is light sensitive. After those couple minutes are up, I take the piece of metal or the plate, we call it the plate, out of the tank, and I load it into a little holder that is then able to fit into my camera. And then I'll go back out. I'll reset my subjects, make sure we don't have any flyaway hairs, or make sure nobody's got anything on their face or whatever. And I'll make sure that they're in focus. I'll ask them to sit really still while I load the camera. And then I will give them a countdown, and I will take their picture with an extremely bright flash. And then I pretty much run right back into the dark room, develop it, and then I'm able to come back out like a minute later and show them the photograph. So it's, for this process, I think that it's relatively quick, but it's much slower than, any digital photography. But I think that people that come to my studio and get a photograph are surprised by how quick we can produce an image.
Yeah. I am actually really glad you mentioned the light too, because that was one thing my partner and I, we were like, it's kind of like getting a high five from the sun. It packed a punch,
Yeah,
but it is something like, I'm curious, like, I'm sure there's a reason it has to be much more
totally.
powerful than just natural light.
Yeah, so even with natural sunlight, like I'm looking outside today right now, and we got some gray clouds right now, but it's like good lighting. It's still pretty bright outside. There's good lighting, but right now, if I was photographing you outdoors, I'd probably have to have you stand still for, I don't know, anywhere from 5 to 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, with that light is so bright because, are you familiar with what ISO is?
Yeah. I think of it as the grain, which I don't know if that's the.
Well, it does relate to the grain, yeah. So yeah, when you buy a roll of film, and I think this is easiest because it's like most people have, shot a roll of film or at least seen rolls of film. So, there's like a number on all rolls of film. It'll be 400 or 200 or 800 or whatever. The higher the number is, so if let's say it's 3200, that is really, really sensitive to light, meaning that's like really good. That's a good ISO if you want to do like night photography, because it just provides more light, right? If you went out at night and you had a roll of 200 ISO film, it'd be really hard to get an image. More than likely, you would need a tripod and you'd have to do a long exposure. With 3200 film, you can get away with doing some like handheld shots, or it'll be more grainy. But the ISO of a tintype is singular one, just one. It can range from like 1 to 3, but that means that it's not sensitive to light. So it needs so much light to capture an image.
Wow.
So that is why I have to use that really bright flash. With the ISO being super duper low, that is why I can take such a crystal clear image. I mean, if you've followed me on Instagram, if you've seen my photos nowadays, there's so much detail in my subjects' faces. And that's because of the quick exposure and the low ISO.
That's insane. And the era that I mean, please correct me if this is off base, but like, Civil War era photos where
Mm-hmm.
even just like everybody's eyes seem so intense. And so, it's like you're truly peeking in their soul. It's a type of photography that brings out a whole different kind of vibe and look and feel. And even from people, it's like, I don't know, it's just such a cool experiment.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm curious if there's a particular tintype that you've created that's extra special or holds like a specific meaning for you.
Let me think. Well, yesterday I got to photograph my oldest subject ever. I photographed a 95-year-old man,
Oh, that's incredible.
and that was really cool. And it felt special. A woman that I had photographed in the past came back yesterday with her parents and her grandfather. You know, as we age, so do our bodies. And, this man's face was aged and he had a lot of wrinkles and a lot of just details in his face, if you know what I mean. He was a good looking fella, but he was just really old. And it was really interesting to capture his look as such an older person. I haven't photographed. I mean, if I think about majority of the people I photograph, I would say range from like, you know, 20s to 40s. And then I get some older people every now and then, 50s. Excuse me, 50s, 60s, but I'd never photographed anybody that old, and it was just really cool. His family loved it. He was pretty quiet the whole time, but at the end, he was like really stoked on his photo, and you know, I forget exactly what he said, but he was just like, "Thank you for making me look so beautiful," or "Thank you for making me look so good with this beautiful process. Like you do such a good job." And
Oh, that is so cool.
so
Yeah,
I
I
thought
get it.
that was really cool. I'm trying to think. I mean, like, I have two little brothers. They're 8 and 9. And actually, as I sat down to take this call, I'm at my mom's house. But the tintype I took of them is sitting on a shelf right next to me. I was really stoked when I took their photo, just because I feel like that it was kind of around the time that I started feeling more confident in my ability of making tintypes and creating images in the way that I wanted them to look. And so that one was really nice. And that was gifted to her maybe a year ago for maybe Mother's Day or her birthday. And what else? I got to do some photos at a nude dinner party, which was a lot of fun.
Nice.
And that was actually, yeah. So actually, when I was in California in December, the first two photo events that I did were actually with two friends of mine that I grew up with here in Nashville that have since moved to California. And so it was really cool to do events with old friends of mine in our later years. I mean, we're not so old or anything, but it was just cool to be like, oh, wow, I've known you for so long. And now I'm getting to be a part of your community and the stuff that you do. And I'm able to bring what I do into what you do. And I think that's really cool. So my friend Charlie, she does this nude dinner party called The Food Experience, and everybody's nude. It's not sexual by any means. Some people think it's weird, but I had photographed her. I'd done a couple nudes of her in the past when she would visit to Nashville with the tintype process, and we had always said, "Oh, this would be so cool to do, at one of your dinner parties." But I didn't actually think that I would ever do it.
Yeah.
Just because I didn't have the means to bring all of my photo equipment across the country. But last year I bought a Sprinter van, and when I decided to go to LA, I reached out and I was like, "Hey, do you actually should we actually do this?" And so we did, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, I've just, it's kind of strange. I was hanging out with like 25 people and we were all naked. I was naked included, taking people's photographs.
I was gonna say that wouldn't be fair if you if you showed up.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, it is nuts. I don't know why, but like Dolly immediately comes to mind. Like he was famous for throwing these really hedonistic dinner parties, and that image is just in my mind. But what a cool thing.
I think that some people grow up in communities where like being naked is not a big deal. I think my friends would be like, "That's weird." So I thought it was cool to like do that and just feel totally like at ease and comfortable. Like I think I was nervous for probably the first 5 minutes, and then I felt very comfortable.
I think that's it. It's one of those things where like my big belief is when you get to the end of the road, you want to look back and be like, I had some experiences.
Totally,
Like that
totally.
ultimately that's the goal. So
Yeah.
that is so freaking cool.
And so that
Um
was one. And then the other one was I got to photograph. My friend owns a vintage hot rod shop in California. I got to photograph a bunch of people with their classic cars while I was out there,
Oh,
and that was a lot
sweet.
of fun. And this was a guy that I was like best friends with when I was in high school. So it was really cool to go out there and see him and see his wife and his kid, and then meet a lot of his friends that have classic cars and photograph them with these things that they care about. Because I think that's one thing that I really want to do more of, is just photographing people with things that mean something to them. I think it makes for a more interesting dynamic photograph.
Oh yeah. No, that's super cool. Especially like I'm sure the composition with like the detail of the car and then, their proud look. Like it's just such a cool thing to think about. I'm curious. So you mentioned a little bit about your family, but do you consider yourself coming from like a really creative family or, do different family members have different kind of like interests going back? I'm always curious to see like, is it nature or nurture for makers and handmade?
Um, I mean, I think I forgot that my mom was really good at drawing until recently.
Cute.
But I don't think my mother has done a lot of artistic practices. My dad, like I mentioned earlier, is the one that gave me that large format camera that I
Yeah.
photographed you with. He and his mother were both photographers, and I don't really think that they were doing any necessarily artistic stuff with it. I mean, they were doing like school portraits in the 90s and the early 2000s, and like baseball team photographs, and
Yeah.
like his mom, my grandmother, had a photo studio, and they would just do a lot of portrait photography. So it does like kind of follow suit with what I do in that regard. But again, it was all digital. I guess actually, back in the day, it was film before digital photography became a thing. But yeah, I'm trying to think. I feel like not many of my family members do super artistic things.
Yeah.
I don't think. I don't know. But I think that like all of my friends do. So I think growing up, I was like, man, all my friends are doing cool artistic stuff. I was like, what do I do? Like, I don't have anything. I kind of felt like the oddball.
I think that's a really good take because one of the reasons I'm so interested in this project and talking to people that create things is there is such a deeper like social interaction behind it. Even the act of sharing something you've made to the even the void that is social media sometimes it's like behind that is this need to be like, hey, I see the world like this. Do you see it like this? Or
Hmm.
I made this cool thing. What do you think? So I guess like with that in mind, what do you think makes people connect more deeply with like handmade things, for instance, tintypes? Like what do you think the difference is?
I will say, I think people just think that they look cool. sometimes,
Of course.
sometimes. Well, because sometimes I will say, like, people come in to the studio, and I will always give them, like, in that first 10 to 20 minutes or whatever where we're chatting, I do always ask people if they know what it is that we're doing, you know?
Yeah.
Because I find that some people know what we're doing, and then others just see the photos on my Instagram and think, oh, that looks cool, but they just think it's like a digital photograph,
Yeah.
and they think that I like alter it in Photoshop later to make it look like that, right? But I do think one really cool thing that makes a tintype more special is just that, I mean, again, I'm never going to leave anybody with a bad photo, but it is kind of fun to experience a photo that is kind of like one and done, you know? As in, I don't do a bunch of photos. Like with if you go do a digital photo shoot, you can take a million photos and pick the ones that you want. And I think that
Exactly.
in our day and age, whether it be digital photography or iPhones or whatever, it's like we are used to this instant gratification of being able to alter and edit our photos to look the way that we want to look. It is a nice surprise when people are pleased with the way that they look in this old timey process where you kind of just get what you get, but it looks good.
It really does because it's one of those things where like I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of like one of my favorite things to do in the world is go hang out with my grandma and open
Mhm.
the, 50 boxes of physical photos that she has. And it's almost like having the physical artifact of a moment.
Yeah.
It's like even just the fact that it's physical, you're gonna keep it, you know? It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
whereas like I've lost phones, I've deleted cloud storage, like it's just such a different kind of transactional thinking about memories, whereas a tintype, like, you can't it's there.
Yeah, just the physicality of it and the fact that it will, if cared for properly, it should last for a very long time and could ideally be passed down to future generations. Maybe it does get lost. Maybe it does get thrown away, but it's strong. It's going to hold up and maybe somebody else finds it. And, same thing, I guess, for printed photos, but a printed photo can get wet, it can rip, whereas a tintype is going to hold up a little bit better. And I mean, we have tintypes that still exist from when the process first originated. I
Yeah.
was actually down at the Tennessee State Library, or the archive actually, like in March sometime, and I was kind of just wanting to go check it out. And apparently you have to like have a reason to be there to actually go upstairs to the archives, and I didn't really have a reason. Like I think it's more for people that are working on a project or something, I think I could go back and just be like, "Yeah, I'm working on this." And they would let me up even if it was kind of like a white lie. But downstairs, they did have a bunch of displays of old tintypes that were actually from tintype photo studios that used to exist in downtown Nashville. So
Oh,
I
so
actually
cool.
spent quite a bit of time looking at all these photos and looking at all of these tintypes, but then also looking at just other photos of the actual photo studios that existed and reading about the photographers and reading about the subjects and the styles and methods that they used to do it. And it was actually really cool. And I wasn't really sure, like, I didn't know what I was going to walk into when I went down there. And I was kind of bummed that I couldn't go upstairs. But then I was very delighted when I found that what was available to look at was something that pertained to me. So that was pretty cool.
That is so neat. Yeah, and I think about, my partner and I, we love a good antique store, and that's something where, like, I don't know, just, like, the presentation that used to go behind, like, delivering a tintype. Like, there's these,
Hmm.
like, really old, ornate, cool custom frames with, like, a pocket for the tintype, and
Yep.
just the idea of, like, sending somebody a photo is, like, polar opposite of what we do now, where it's like, you text somebody a photo of your food or, like
Yeah.
whereas before it, like, had to be, like, courier service, and it was such a big deal.
Yeah. One
So,
of
I
my
mean,
friends in California makes these little like custom frames for all of his photographs, and they're really cool. Not like a typical frame, but kind of just like a mat board. Like he
yeah.
cuts out a little oval, but then he hand paints on the mat board, and it just looks like something that would have existed when that process originated.
Oh my gosh, that's sick. You're definitely gonna have to send me that one.
Yeah.
So, my next couple questions that I have for you are totally optional, so I want you to tell me just no if you don't wanna answer one.
Okay.
But it's more about the business of handmade. So,
Yeah.
one of the things that I'm really interested in is not only, like, learning the stories of cool makers and encouraging just, everyday folks, everyday consumers to buy more handmade intentionally, but also kind of understanding the dynamics of, like, what makes it hard. And so my first question for you is this currently your full-time gig?
Yes, for the most part. I would say that the majority of my income comes from this, but then when I'm not traveling and if I'm in Nashville, I will work a few days painting murals just to have some stability, you know,
Yeah.
just to know that I'm going to make X amount of money in a week, just to know that I'll be all right. Because with doing this, I can make a lot of money, but then sometimes things happen. Like being in LA, I had over 100 people booked for the month of January, and then the fires happened. So that canceled the majority of the business that I had,
Wow,
or the
yeah.
appointments that I had. So I was kind of shit out of luck. So yeah, having that stability with the mural stuff is good. But yeah, I would say that this is the majority of my income. It's great. But then at other times, it kind of sucks. I think the part that I really enjoy is just the act of meeting people and actually doing the photos. The stuff that you don't really see that I don't like as much is, always making sure that I have money and always making sure that I'm promoting myself and getting people into the studio. And, sometimes it feels annoying. Like you have to push, 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 push,
Yeah.
push, and like, put these things up on Instagram or whatever. And it just feels like frustrating. And that's not the fun part.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something that, a couple of the makers that I've talked to before as well, it's one of those things where it's like, with the internet,
Yeah.
it's become so abstracted in terms of how we can connect with people that it's almost so overwhelming because it's like, okay, not only can I see what everybody else is doing, but also like, how do I stay true to myself while making stuff, but also getting the word out, which is
Yeah.
such a tricky thing. So I'm curious if somebody is interested in having a tintype image made,
hmm
what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
I prefer everyone to come through Instagram. I've just found that that's where most people tend to reach out and where most people are active. So it seems to be the quickest, easiest way to, book that appointment. There are people that don't use Instagram, and I salute you, and they can always email me. But I just find that it's easiest to talk through Instagram just because with email it can just take a while to do the whole back and forth and like get something booked, whereas on Instagram I feel like it's just like very instant.
Yep.
So I think Instagram is definitely preferred, but email works too. And if you have my number, give me a call.
That's it. Oh, it's beautiful. Okay, I have one more question for you. And that is there like a dream project that if you could photograph any individual or group of people or travel to X place to take photography, is there anything that's kind of like, man, this is the ultimate?
I do think that I am excited about something that I'm hoping to make happen in the next couple months, but everything just costs money. Anything that's associated with any kind of art or photography or printmaking or whatever costs money. So I would really like to start making different prints using different printing styles, whether it be like cyanotypes or platinum palladium. Those are just two that are very well known, but there's a bunch of other printmaking processes that I would like to try. That's something that I've been focusing my attention on and trying to just put some money aside to save up for, various chemicals that I need. With these processes, you can use the sun, but the sun and the clouds and everything are always changing, so it makes it harder to know just how to expose your image. So something that I've been wanting to purchase is a very large UV box, like a UV light box,
Yeah.
so that I can make, I think the one I'm looking at right now is like a 20 by 24-inch UV box, but I would like to make these like really big prints. But I've been scouting locations and I would like to go out and photograph more landscapes, whether that be, more natural landscapes or cityscapes or whatever. But I would like to do this with the tintype process and then make these larger prints. And I think I would really enjoy making the prints. I think that's like majority of the reason that I want to do it. But then on the other hand, it'd be cool to sell them. And like, I think one thing about making tintypes is I'm like, wow, this is so cool. Like, so many people have something that I've created in their home, which I think is really cool. But it'd be cool to like know that like I have a photograph hanging in somebody's house.
Oh yeah.
I don't think about like traveling to a place to take a photo or necessarily like a person. But yeah, I think that's kind of like the next thing I'm gearing up for.
So cool. That's it for this episode of the Makers Movement podcast. I hope you're walking away as inspired by Aidan's incredible vibe as I am, and maybe thinking about the special places that live in your memory. So here's your challenge for the month. Find one handmade item that reminds you of a favorite place, supporting a maker in the process. When you find it, tag us at makers.movement. We'd love to see it and share with the community. And as always, when you choose handmade, you're choosing story, soul, and support for real human creativity. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, happy hunting.